Well, welcome back to our bonus series podcast on our I Am series, where we're diving into the names of God. If you're joining us for the first time, this is a series that we are doing in our Sunday services at Discovery Church at the moment, and we thought it would be great to do a little add-on and dive a little bit deeper into the names of God that we've been looking at. So today on the podcast, I've got joining me the beautiful Olivia McDowell, who is our worship pastor here at Discovery. Hey, Liv.
Hello.
Hello. And also Zeke Murley is back again, our young adults and neighbourhood engagement pastor. So great to have you two here today. Maddie's out on the couch, still unwell, but thank you for jumping in, Liv, today. But we're excited to hear from you and hear some of your thoughts.
Thanks for having me.
So far in this series, a quick recap. We started in week 1. Matt laid a really great foundation for us on I Am and the names of God in general. And so if you haven't had a listen to that yet, track back. The first 10 minutes of that Sunday message is a really great framework for that. And then he also led us through Jehovah Jireh in the first week, the Lord is my provider. And then this past week gone, which is what we're going to unpack today, is Jehovah Nissi, the Lord is my banner, or Yahweh is my banner, or Yahweh Nissi, the Lord is my banner. Or actually, the other phrase he used on the weekend was the Lord is my standard, which I hadn't heard before, which I thought was a really great way of saying it. So we're going to dive into that today. As I've just been reflecting on it, I'm preparing to preach this coming week on Jehovah Rapha, the Lord is my healer. What's been interesting is how much of the law of first mention that we've been working off, which is where we look at when is the first time in Scripture that God is referred to in this way. And actually it's a really great principle for Bible reading in general. When you're thinking about a topic or a part of God's nature or something in particular, looking at the law of first mention and where it first pops up in Scripture is really helpful place to start when it comes to context, because we never just want to lift verses and passages out of Scripture and make them mean whatever we want them to mean. We need to make sure they're anchored in their original context for the people and the place where it was first given. So the law of first mention of this particular name of God, Jehovah Nissi, happens in Exodus 17. But I was just having a look back through the previous chapters, and it's amazing in such a short space of time the journey that the Israelites go on. So in chapter 14, we have the Red Sea moment where Moses leads them through the Red Sea, that miracle Red Sea moment. Pharaoh and his chariots are in hot pursuit. They make it through the Red Sea. They find themselves in the desert of Shur, or Sur, however you like to pronounce that. But and then we find them at Mara, where the waters are bitter, and we're going to look at that actually this coming week. Then they go from there. They find themselves in Elim, and then they have a period of provision again. But then they're back in the desert again. And they go through these, and then there's the manna and quail moment in Exodus 16 where the Lord provides food for them in the desert.
Yeah.
And then we go from there into Exodus 17 where we hear this story where they have a battle against the Amalekites, who were a pretty ferocious opponent at the time and were there to pick apart the Israelites. But the Lord shows up in that place and leads Moses, and Moses goes up on the top of the mountain, and as we heard in the story on the weekend, every time he raised his shepherd's staff, which was a great piece of symbolism for us, they were winning the battle, but every time he lowered the staff, they were losing the battle. And eventually they claim that victory through the Lord's provision, and Moses builds a temple there and says this place will be called Jehovah Nissi, for the Lord is my banner. The Lord is our banner. And so it's actually given to the community. That word and that promise is given to the community, and we're starting to see that sometimes God reveals himself to one person, sometimes he reveals himself and part of his nature to a whole community of people. So just first thoughts from you guys as you listened to the message on Sunday and as you've thought about Jehovah Nissi and what that means for you in your own life. What are the things that come to mind?
I was very jealous because when we set out to do this series, I really wanted to preach on this name of God. But Matt got that one. That's okay. But no, I just love the victory element of this story. And I love the imagery of just that banner being held overhead and the staff being raised, and just that overall sign of God's provision and authority, and just just that victory piece is just something that really resonates in my spirit from just my journey and what I've walked through, and just knowing God to be faithful to that in my life. It was just something that story really resonated in my spirit.
That's so good. I think the idea of a banner, and we went through a little bit of that on Sunday, just like what it does and what it is for us. Like, a banner is informative, and it's obvious, and I love that we refer to the Lord as our banner, because he's obvious in our life when he's at work. And as I like thought about it on Sunday while Matt was talking, I was like, I feel like the banner is a sign of intimacy. Like, it's God's claim over us, and his way of saying to us, like, you are mine and I am yours, and I'm looking after you. Like, and it's an obvious thing. You can hold it out for the world to see. Like, it's and I think I loved that power that's behind that, is having him as our banner over our lives.
That's great, Liv. That's I love that you just brought out that two-way piece of it, because we can think of the Lord as our banner, as in he's the one that has won the victory. And when we face any circumstance or situation and we go into that knowing that the Lord is our banner, it gives us like a confidence and a peace. But also the opposite part of that, and maybe the invitation to partner with God in that, is if God is if you think about like any protest you go to, or even if you go to a carnival and you're on a team, and every team at a sports carnival have their banner or their colours out, right? Or you go to the footy and you know who the Hawks supporters are, you know who the Tigers support. Who do you go for?
The Blues.
The Blues. Sorry, Zeke, I should know
the
that. Who the Blues, like you clearly know who goes for who, because they're wearing the colours and they've got the banner. And so there is that invitation. Like, do people know that the Lord is our banner, and do we declare that with who we are in our everyday lives, in the places and spaces that we go? And also the evidence of, are we submitted to the fact that the Lord is our banner and we're living in his victory rather than in our own strength or striving?
That submission piece, I think, is like really key, because being under a banner, you identify with who that banner represents. And so when we're called to represent Christ, it means there is an element of submission, that we are to be identified with him. So no longer, and I think that's even beautiful in the context of a church community, when we all say we want to be gathered under the banner of God, the banner of Christ, who, within the church. It means that our individual differences and our individual flaws or even strengths don't matter nearly as much as the one who we're representing. And so I think that's a beautiful point you bring up there with the submission piece there.
That's so good.
I feel like the people of God, they go on this journey, this desert wandering journey. I resonate so much with the book of Exodus, just all through it, because I just feel like it's such a reflection of, we're a people on the move. We know that. But they just go through these cycles of like forgetting God's goodness, forgetting his provision. Like, literally 2 minutes ago, he's providing manna and quail, like this incredible miracle in the middle of a desert. There's birds covering, birds that are really expensive. Like, if you went to any restaurant right now, quail, like, that's a delicacy. Quail all over the ground, like covering the ground. That coriander seed wafer that they get provided, like, this is literally just happened. And then they're in this very next scene. It's almost like literally the next day or the next scene, and they've forgotten that God is with them, and they've forgotten that God has led them so far and has provided for them so far, and they're upset and they're feeling defeated, and and so I resonate with that. And I feel like we have times in our lives where we have really good forgetteries, and God's faithful to us one moment and we've literally forgotten it the very next moment, and we're grumbling and we're upset and we're despairing that God's not going to come through for us. And so I wonder for you guys, like, obviously we all have seasons where you feel like you're feeling defeated, or you feel like you're not winning. You're not winning, and you're not sure, like, you don't feel confident that there's going to be a good outcome in whatever circumstance or situation you're facing, whether it's in life, in relationships, in finances, in your spiritual life, like whatever that might be. How do we, and you know, how have you, as you guys are on your own journey of faith and discipleship, like the invitation here is the Lord's revealing himself to us afresh as our banner, as the one who is victorious in our lives and through our lives and for us. How do you lean into that part of God's nature? Or what do you feel like is the invitation for us individually and as a church in this season? Why is God revealing himself to us as our banner afresh in this season?
Love that.
That wasn't really on my list of questions, so
No,
sorry.
that's great.
Now I'm putting you on the spot.
It's interesting though, like I read through chapter 17 again this morning, and like looking at the physical like combat that's happening, and while they're having to raise the staff to win this combat, like I think you can draw a parallel to the war of the mind that we're in at the moment. Like the world is in such a war of like emotions and feelings being the dictator of your life, and it's being held up as that is our God at the moment. Like your feelings are your God, and that's you submit to your feelings, and that's how you make your decisions. And it feels like that piece about God being our banner, and he is the one we are submitting to, that is coming afresh right now for our church to resubmit ourselves under his name and under his authority, and to lay down those, you know, that I think that temptation to be under your feelings and submitting to I feel this way, so I must be this way. Like
This reminds me of that scripture of the words of the Apostle Paul when he's talking about, I won't be mastered by anything, but only by coming under the authority of the Lord. And it's interesting you say that, Liv, and I wonder if that's right across our culture, or particularly in your generation, where that piece around, you know, I will live according to my feelings, yet the result of that is you're like a weed being tossed in the breeze, and 1 minute you're up and 1 minute you're down. And in some ways it's a bit like the people of God, right? Like that's how they're like 1 minute they're up and they're loving it, next minute they're down and they're crying and they're grumbling, then they're up and then they're down and then they're up. And you know, I think you're right, like I think God is trying to teach them here, hey, I'm consistent, you can trust me, I'm looking after you, but you have a role to play in this.
It's pretty easy in culture to lower your colours if we're going on that banner theme. Like there's a lot of cultural pulls that would, and it's even in this story here, it would have been easier to just lower the staff and just hope it works out and just take control of it yourself and hope that, you know, the outcome that you're looking for happens. It's harder to hold the banner up, but there's so many things culturally that it just, in a lot of ways, it'd just be easier if I didn't have to live for Christ in this moment, or it'd just be easier if I didn't have to represent
Hold
God here. And culturally now as well, and I think it's becoming harder because Christianity is not as widely accepted in our culture at the moment either. So there's a lot of cultural pulls that are just going, it'd just be easier if we just lower our colours and not represent and just it's like, if we're going to go back to the footy team example, it's very easy to support your team when they're winning and everything's going good, but as soon as they start losing, those banners go down pretty quickly. And you were saying we got very good forgetteries, and I am very much reminded.
I love it.
Very much reminded of that. I like that word as well. It's a good word. I'm reminded of, you know, Moses, when they had the victory, he made a place in which they would remember that God was their banner in that moment. And I wonder if we need to do the same thing in our lives. We need to create places and even memories or things that remind us of who God is for those moments when our banners can easily be lowered, or maybe the victory doesn't seem as clear, or maybe our feelings are starting to guide us. That's why I love church, because I walk into church and seeing other people worship and hearing people's testimonies and hearing people journey through challenges and then come out knowing God has been faithful and victorious in their situation. the church is a very beautiful reminder of God being our banner.
Yeah, that's great. Actually, I was thinking about that this week, Zeke, because we read all these examples in scripture of where they built an altar there and they named it this because this is what happened there. And a few years ago, I was on a guided spiritual retreat, and we had somebody come and share with us about the power of memory stones. And of collecting memory stones throughout your life that represent a significant moment that you've had with the Lord. Perhaps it's a promise that he's made to you, a word of encouragement, or a word of knowledge that he's given you, something that you can look at and go, that is a visual reminder for me of when the Lord met me at that time and spoke to me about this. And so I've started to do that over the last few years. I've got this collection of really random things. Like some things are just, it might be a stone from the beach that I was on when I had a moment with the Lord. But as soon as I pick that stone up, it takes me to that place. I've got some photographs of places that I've been, significant words or artworks or pictures. Like it could be literally anything that's meaningful to you, that's a symbol that helps you go, oh, actually... yeah, that's right. That's what the Lord has done for me. And I think there's a lot of value in that. And because we don't have we're not a desert people. So anymore, in that we don't kind of have physical monuments that we would build, but what are the ways we can build those practices into our everyday discipleship that remind us of those significant moments? Like when you look back through your life, where are the flags in the sand all the way along the journey? So I agree. I think we need more of those things as we move forward. So we talked a little bit before, and Liv, you talked about, the battle of the mind and feelings and all of those sorts of things. Is there anything else that you think is in the culture of the age we live in right now that are, false gods or idols that have set themselves up against this idea of the Lord as our banner? Like what else do you see in culture? And
it for me, it's and I was trying to figure out the word, but it's that almost self-righteousness that we can have around we are where we are because of what we have done. Like it actually humors me a little bit, like when people talk about like really talented or like gifted people, like like LeBron James, for example, best basketball player ever. And there can be a lot of credit given to LeBron James, but in the end, I sort of sometimes ask myself the question, well, who made him? God made him the way that he is. And there's a whole bunch of anomalies that have happened in his life that makes him just like the top 0.99% of people in the world that makes him that talented. But I think it's very easy to go, I am where I am because of myself and because of my actions and because of my choices, and forget that everything that we have, down to the breath that we're breathing right now in this room, is because of God. And so the banner submission piece is all that we need to make habits of thanking God for even little things and even the large things, and can constantly living in humility, understanding where everything comes from.
That's good. I feel like you touched on that last week as well, the idea of the grind, like where it's very ingrained in our culture at the moment. Like, I'm grinding hard for this, and so I'm like, I'm the best. Like I provide for myself and I provide for my every need. And I thought that was really interesting last week too. It was a good pickup.
Sometimes there's the temptation for us as believers, and I'll just own this for myself, maybe it doesn't happen to you, but when things are going really well, we give ourselves a pat on the back and we're like, I'm totally awesome, I nailed that, I'm doing really well.
So
but when things are not going well, I'll switch sometimes I can be really quick to blame God. I'll be like, God, you're not showing up. So when it's going well, I want to take the credit. When it's not going well, there's no way I'm taking the credit. That's God's problem, not mine. And he's not showing up. And so I think there's a challenge for us in that too. And I was thinking, Liv, even just in your role, as our worship pastor, but also for our worship leaders, like you guys, every week as we gather in our corporate gatherings, you play this role of holding the banner up and reminding us of who we're there for, and pointing our eyes to Jesus. And, we always start our gathered times together with praise. And I love that. But it's a good reminder for us. How do we embed how do we embed this nature of God into our everyday discipleship that we would, because I guess the thing for me is when now as I'm going on the journey and getting a little bit older, and you look back and remember the times in your journey where the Lord's been really faithful to you. When I'm facing opposition now, there's a great peace that comes that I feel when I'm facing opposition, when I remember that the Lord is my banner, because all of a sudden it releases the pressure to have to solve it on my own. And there's a peace in knowing that the Lord is fighting for you, or that we're fighting together and we're partnering with him in overcoming whatever it is that's before us. And so, I guess just as we wrap this conversation up today, what's your encouragement for someone who's listening today, and maybe they are in a season where they're like, I just feel defeated. This situation that's in front of me right now feels way out of my control, and I feel powerless to change the outcome. What's the encouragement for someone in that place today, just as we close?
I think there's something really powerful that happens when we worship, and I love that we open church by doing that, because it lifts your eyes from an insular perspective, and from, I'm so bad at this, I'm so like, I'm looking at all my faults and all of my shortcomings, and it lifts your eyes heavenward, and it lifts your eyes to God and him as your banner, and what he does in your life, and just not even that, actually, just the character, like his strong character, that he's like, he is a God of victory, and he's a God of goodness and kindness, and he's powerful in your life. I think we can get very caught up in our own shortcomings and forget that when you submit to God, like, you're allowing him to do whatever he can and will do in your life. And that's, I think that should be really encouraging for us to be able to lay ourselves down like that. But
I think the great reminder for me was that in terms of simple acts of obedience can make a really big difference. Because if you look at Moses, if the staff was up, they were having victory, and if the staff was down, there wasn't victory happening. Very, very small thing in the physical, but very small acts of obedience in the physical can change a lot in the spiritual, and actually can start bringing victory. And so it's that trying, and I'm trying to remember, maybe it's you've said this, Jody, I'm trying to remember who said it to me, but like, we're very inclined to go to the path of least resistance and trying to just walk the easy road, when sometimes just an act of obedience can break something, not just in the physical realm, but in the spiritual realm, that actually brings victory into our lives and situations. And so that was the reminder for me this week.
Great. Love it. And that final reminder that, that picture of the shepherd's staff, a really common everyday implement that everybody had, and that reminder that God uses ordinary people to do extraordinary things when we follow him and when we walk in trust and obedience to him. So that's awesome. Well, thanks, guys. Thanks for being part of the conversation today. Next week, we're going to be unpacking Jehovah Rapha, the Lord is my healer. So looking forward to opening up that scripture. If you want to get ahead, we're going to be diving into Exodus chapter 15. But we're looking forward to having you guys back on the podcast next week, and feel free to join us on Sunday on site or online. Till next week.